is amazing that before the foundation started investing in the advancing public service media, media was actually divided into state broadcasting and private sector. The tenets of public service media was never a question. And even the deep understanding of the media being the society watchdog was never understood. The media was seen as a tool for the elite and for the ruling class. And such that, actually communities gave their own naming for the radio. The radio is something that the BBC said, the radio said. They didn't see how they could engage with it. And the TV was like somebody who's a tool that sits very far. And once the TV capture that's now the classical truth. There's no question about it. The newspaper was for those who could read. So that's why the newspaper became a symbol that those who are working, quote unquote, in the evening to show that you're working class, you held a newspaper on your hand. It was, as what you call a status symbol. The role of arts and culture came apparent after the opening of the Go Down. That culture started being significant in our lives. That Go Down situated culture centrally to the ongoing of our society. And now you see how the content that is being developed through arts and culture is enriching our media.
We see that community is diverse and people need to have the space to be able to express and engage with society, with community, with issues in the way in which they're gifted. So I think artists have a particular talent to be able to look at things laterally, to be able to share things with us in a conceptual way that helps us to understand things a little bit differently than sort of straightforward and upfront. I think that there's also an opportunity to imagine, which is important. There's an opportunity to also mirror things in a different way. So we feel that actually the contribution of culture and arts in particular is an important way of beginning to find meaning in our society and to be able to tackle issues. I think to be able to be a space that still is 10 years on is important. And I know that there are a number of other spaces that have been able to make that achievement. It means that in the last decade and a half, actually culture has been able to be sustained in terms of visibility and in terms of its activities within the Nairobi space, within the Kenya space. That is important, and that for us gives us, I think, the confidence and really the impulse to continue to work. But I think that we also see that the role that artists and art can play in the advancement of society is still unexplored.
One of the things that we're really proud of is giving the voice to the voiceless and actually supporting rural-based musicians and poor urban musicians as well. And a good example is some ladies that we discovered in Garissa. They're known as Gargar. And we were able actually to take them to the international podium from where they were in Garissa and also creating for them means of livelihood for them to support their families. We go to the villages and look for artists because most artists are quite poor and are not able always to reach Nairobi to get exposure. So that has been very successful. The other one is the retracing series. Here, what we do is to identify old artists and then archive their material so that their music can be used as a reference point to the younger generations. So that's one of the other program, and we have really been supported by the Ford Foundation. The other one is Singing Wells program. Singing Wells is almost like the first program supported on Kenyan music, but here we're actually looking at East Africa. And what we do is try to record traditional music that is fast disappearing from the scene. There's a lot of fantastic traditional music that we need to expose to the youth so that they can take this very traditional music and make great new modern sounds out of it.
DocuBooks is East Africa's only film fund.
And this means a great deal in a space like this where you have 60% of the youth under the age of 25 desperately looking to earn a living and being drawn and attracted very much to arts and to culture, and yet there is no funding for arts. There's very little intense and practical training for the arts. And on top of all that, you know, even when one becomes a storyteller or a filmmaker or an artist of some kind, our networks are not very strong. And so what DocuBox provides on top of financial assistance, giving teams up to $20,000 each to make their films happen. And documentary is something that is very, very important to the well-being of a nation.
And I want to believe that when you talk about public service media, you're talking about issues that are most likely coming off and being shared by people, spaces which are not usually the common spaces where issues are discussed.
It was set up in 2003 when a group of writers and artists came together to try and discuss a place where they could share their work and set up a publishing space. So we see ourselves as providing alternative creative content to the idea of media as a whole. I think the underpinnings of media, like the traditional underpinnings are, I suppose, state broadcasting, commercial media, and community media. Those used to be the old formats. I see us now being in this place where we're part of like the kind of reformation of these things, the blurring of these lines. But our big thing is to like, how do you bring alternative narratives and at the same time bring some aesthetics?
In terms of, say, digital broadcasting, where it's possible for people like us who existed sort of on the periphery or producing alternative narratives, as Billy mentioned. One of the great uses for us in that is our ability to be able to step into that space and to then maybe acquire platforms or build sites of memory, if you like.
Humor throughout the ages has always been a tool that has been used to communicate, and we felt confident that it's an idea that that people will buy. It has been difficult for us to attract sponsorship from the private sector. One, because we are very independent and we are very controversial. Second is also is the fact that business and politics in Kenya and in many parts of the world, they are very close, and so probably you have a situation where a lot of business would want to stay away from us because we ruffle feathers, we are politically incorrect. And so we have to depend largely on a group of partners and donors who have funded our projects.
The Ford Foundation's Advancing Public Media program is like very crucial, because for me, some of the first projects I started to watch on there were like XYZ, like we use music from Ketebul. We learned about running a big set from people like XYZ. We did our previous writing with people like Kwani, and just ourselves, the work we've been able to do in transforming the sports pages. Over the last couple of years, maybe the last decade or so, mainstream media has moved to like very quick and shallow pieces. They're telling the day one story, and they never go it's very rare that you find journalists or media houses with the resources at the time to go behind a story and tell a very in-depth story. So we found that was lacking, and basically what happened is we started doing it ourselves, and throughout the last 3 or 4 years, the work that we've been doing with the support of the Ford Foundation, we found, for example, that we've been placing 2,000-word articles in the nation every Saturday, and we found that the media houses have started doing it themselves. Digitization is coming. That's uncoupling of content from infrastructure. We don't know how that will go right now.
By the way, advancing public service media is not only public broadcasting. Advancing public service media means that even within the private sectors, within the community, within the public broadcasting or state broadcasting, the media exists with one clarion call, that it's the society watchdog, and it's society's mirror. So because the society watchdog, there are tenets of such an institution that it needs to portray every aspect of the society. So for us, public service media means that how do you mainstream views? How do you reflect totality of the society? How do you objectively write quality stories that can empower that society? How do you strengthen that sector that can be used as a tool for development, for enhancement of democracy for that society? And how can new emerging technology be used in a way that can be able to also strengthen that sector for the society good?
The work that we do now really has its roots way back at the time of independence. And for me particularly, I was staying in Mombasa at that time, and of course rejoiced absolutely when independence came and all that. But very soon after that, in Kenya, they have started an anti-Asian kind of hysteria, and it made me question myself as to who was I really, and what right did I have in Kenya to call myself a citizen of Kenya, And I think in order to answer that question, it became necessary for me to delve into the history of the South Asian leaders in the past. Researching meant documenting that history, and ultimately also led me to write some biographies. When I felt challenged about being a South Asian in Kenya, I realized as I went into the history and collected the material, that basically what we need to do in this country is really to build nationhood. It's not just the South Asians, there's so many other communities and minorities which are not feeling included in the Kenyan scene. Ford Foundation has been fantastic for me in my writing.
The pure commercialization of media in Kenya makes it very difficult for social justice activists to get the kind of exposure that one needs.
Although media is very central in the development of any country, in the development of the world, media has also been sidelined. If you look at the UN and all these treaties that people sign, media is always neglected. And so I think it's a noble thing, it's a noble course that Ford Foundation has taken in its programming to make sure that media remains as a core component of their work, because there's been a lot of funding for gender equality, for livelihoods, for environment, but media is always sidelined. So I see us, in the next 5 years, still in this environment, strengthening the role of women journalists in the environment, in the changing environment, strengthening the role of women leaders in terms of promoting their visibility, and also strengthening the role of communities in terms of access to ICT.
So we are journalists, but we have a competence of looking and analyzing issues from a gender perspective. So that one we have been respected. You find these media houses, whenever they have something on gender and they want that thing to be communicated, well, they will fall back to us and ask, can you do this for us? In the last couple of years, we have seen tremendous improvement in terms of women in management position in the media, and in terms of women journalists. And we have seen even women journalists now reporting on those issues which were male-dominated, like crime, football, and these other areas that were no-goes on for women journalists. The new digital move is the one likely to give people space and us to come in and educate people. How do you use it? One, to monitor, to participate effectively in the governance process, and even to demand accountability. So I think this is the big frontier where we are heading towards.
MPLC has found its niche in the policy area, if you like, of the Kenyan media scene. What is the policy that directs the media? We see right now a lot of controversy regarding Kenya's migration from the analog signal to the digital field. And we seem to be playing politics with it. Hence the controversy and the battles we see in court and outside court, and hence the differences we see between the big media firms, the licensing authority, and the Ministry of Information, Communication and Technology. That there's a missing link there, and the missing link is the policy that directs all that.
Our commitment as an institution is to create a knowledgeable and free society that participates in sustainable development. So we define our vision in terms of knowledge creation, in terms of freedom, as well as sustainable development. And that means complete inclusion of society through media. In our case, we try as much as possible to work with local language media. And part of the reason why we work with local language media is the connection with communities. And to that end, we have been very aggressively involved in the formulation of the Languages of Kenya policy, which would then provide an enabling environment for local language media to flourish and to serve citizens better. We also know that a lot of politicians have now gotten interested in becoming media owners. So media entrepreneurship is a very, very important component of the new Kenya, if you want. And our challenge then is, how do we ensure professionalism and ethical reporting across the board?
We are in the business of the preservation and demystification of the Sheng language and culture. And we do that by building platforms for open and candid conversation. From a broader perspective, the world is changing. Technology has revolutionized the world. In the 1980s, it was transport and communication. 1990s, it was FM stations and music. 2000, mobile technology, infrastructure, all that has changed the internet in a big way. So what's happening is that everybody is scrambling for an audience. Everybody, from the government, private sector, the media sector, that everybody is looking looking to capture the attention of this audience. The impact that we've had is that we've been able to consolidate these audiences under single platforms.
The way we do our human rights work is unique in terms of we do it through film. We produce film products and we screen these products in the hopes that these products will inspire people to take action. You might think that we're just simply, producing films, producing documentaries, but we've realized that these documentaries, once screened in the communities, actually have the effect of inspiring communities to themselves demand for accountability. The impact that we've seen has been through the creation of, we call them community action teams. And these are self-organized groups from the field who actually call their leaders to question as to their governance. How are they governing their communities? How are they governing their counties? How are they being held accountable for what they're doing? And we've seen this to the extent to where some community action teams have held peaceful demonstrations and submitted petitions to county officials and national officials demanding for their rights. And we have the new media laws that were passed. I think it was last year they were passed. So you're seeing a media that is restricted in terms of what they can talk about, what they can, publish, and the fact that a lot of what is happening in Kenya, a lot of the human rights violations in Kenya are being done by the Kenyan government. The media is very scared, first of all. They're very scared to tell the truth about what is happening. And honestly, they're bought. They have been bought. And when you have a media that is compromised, it's not a media anymore. Security for human rights activists is something that we're continuously thinking about, and we have to continuously think about. With Ford Foundation, we've realized that they're aware of this, and they are changing. The conversations we've had with Ford is that they're changing their strategic plan to to accommodate for that.
There are not many organizations that are like Ford Foundation that give grantees quite a flexible hand, a free hand in designing their programs, and this motivates us to be even more innovative in what we do. We realized there was a huge gap when it comes to matters of intellectual property, which includes copyright, patents, trademarks, and the whole family of copyright with regard to local content. There was also a big problem in terms of absence of local content on various media. Our organization accepts that content is king, but we also realize that context really rules. In June 2011, 98% of the global web pages on the internet had content that was not African. Now, out of that 2% is what was really African content online. But out of that 2%, South Africa accounted for 1.4%, meaning the rest of Africa shared only 0.6% of content online. The internet is a very powerful medium globally, and if we are absent, then we are actually not represented. Therefore, the need to have our content online. So our first project, it actually involved intervention on being more assertive on on promoting African content online. The second bit is that once this content is there online, rather than perceiving or pursuing the famous or the popular belief that Africans don't have any content, is it needed to be protected. Because the notion that we are only infringers or pirates, or so to speak, hides the fact that we do have a lot of content which is actually our own and is actually pirated upon by various other people. So we need it protected as well as promoted. Therefore, copyright is just one of the many aspects of what are called works of the minds, and therefore it's a big tool that is actually being used globally in ensuring that the interests of the local people on their IP are protected. There are not many organizations that are like Ford Foundation that give grantees quite a flexible hand, a free hand in designing their programs, and this motivates us to be even more innovative in what we do.
No, I think the relationship with the Ford Foundation has been a very important one for us, of course. It's been the relationship that first of all, seeded the birth of this space that we call the Go Down, and has actually been a relationship that continues 10 years on to sustain us. In that period of 10 years, of course, we have found other partners. And when you find other partners, it's now then easy to compare the relationships that you have with different partners. I think one of the strengths with the Ford Foundation is that they are actually with you. They're walking with you. They will listen to your ideas and your concerns and your challenges and your plans for how to move ahead, and they will work with that. But they will also advise. They might say, look at this. They'll also introduce and say, network with so-and-so. This might be useful to you. But I think unlike some other partners that are also in that space, they're not prescriptive, and I think that is important.